Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Passive House Show, where we explore everything about passive homes and this amazing building model, right, that is going to take over the world eventually. We just want to spread awareness about it. My name is Mikhail Laxton. This, everybody, give it up for Mr. Paul Keeley, Ekobuilt founder, CEO, and the podcast guest again. How you doing, man?
Good. Yeah, it feels good. We're getting back into it, you know. And I always say it's a great time to be alive because you're right. It really is exciting. Passive house is exciting. It's causing a lot of great energy in the home building world and just good things that it's doing for the world altogether. It's great to be alive, man. Great to be alive.
So the title of today's episode is "What the Heck is a Passive House?" And I can't think of a better person to ask about this than the man himself, Paul Keeley.
What's a passive home? I love that question.
What the heck is a passive house?
That's where it all starts, right? What the heck is this? And ultimately, it's a house that requires very little heating and cooling. It's as simple as that. So it's a type of home that, through a good portion of the year, for optimal comfort, doesn't require any heating and cooling, regardless of the environment that the home is in. But whether the environment is a predominant cooling environment, like most areas in Australia, let's say, or predominantly heating environment, like most areas in Canada, it's a house that uses very little energy for heating and cooling. Again, every house is electrically operated when it comes down to it in the developed world.
So no gas.
No gas, and the amount of electricity that the house actually uses totally depends on the occupants. Really, how often are the appliances being used? How often is the oven in the kitchen being used? How often is the laundry being used? Dishwasher. These are all components to how much energy the house actually uses. With respect to a passive home, the energy that's required for heating and cooling, very minimal. So building your house like a thermos really does work, and it works for keeping the heat inside if it's a predominant heating environment or environment that requires more heating than cooling, such as Canada again, or a house that's designed to keep the heat out of the house. Australia, exactly, predominantly cooling environment, right?
I was doing a bit of research last night, and I wasn't even looking up anything about Australia, but there are a handful of particularly tiny passive homes in Australia and New Zealand now, which is really interesting. I like that. So, all right, so one of the most asked questions about passive house after what the heck is a passive house is, what are the approaches to building a passive house?
For sure. So, with respect to passive home, when we talk about fundamentally what it is, how it's built, how it is separate, or how it's different from any other home, is basically, I refer to it as a holistic concept. It's a sum of all parts. There's ultimately 5 parts to a passive home. Number 1, super insulated building envelope. So, in a very high heating climate or cooling climate, R75 walls, R110 in the roof system would be the thermal requirements. Number 2, airtight construction, so 0.6 air changes per hour, so a very high degree of airtightness is number 2. High performance glazing, so glazing that's designed to keep the heat out when you want it to be kept outside of the house. And also, windows that reflect the heat back to the inside during in areas where the home is being heated in cold climates in the wintertime. Number 4, thermal bridge-free detailing. So this is really the single most important probably part of a passive home for ultra energy efficiency in any very hot climate or very cold climate. Okay, so thermal bridge free, so eliminating any pathway of heat through the building. So whether it's heat coming from the outside to the inside in predominant cooling environments, or heat traveling from the inside of the home to the outside when you're heating the home in predominant heating required climates. So when we think about thermal bridge construction, a type of construction that's full of thermal bridge, think of a standard code built home. A home that's built with standard 2x6 construction where the inside of the framing is connected to the interior finish, the drywall, for example, also connected to the outside siding of the home. So, it's
scary.
It's scary. It's gonna basically drive the heat either to the inside of the house in predominant cooling environments or to the outside in predominant heating environments. So get rid of the thermal bridge by ultimately detailing the house with a high degree of insulation that wraps around the entire structure of the home. It's very easily done, very simply done. And it's proven to work. It's proven to, ultimately allow the house to truly operate like a thermos. And a reason why there's next to no energy required, regardless of how hot it is outside in predominant cooling environments, Australia, or cold outside in predominant heating situations like similar to Canada. So that's a loaded answer for number 4. And, lastly, that fifth ingredient to a passive home is a high heat recovery ventilation. Okay, so homes need to be ventilated, not just simply because a passive home is a high airtight type of house, but any house really should be ventilated to dispel the contaminants that are building up inside the home, whether it's carbon dioxide from people breathing or from contaminants mitigating itself to the inside of the home. With this respect to a passive home, airtight construction naturally keeps all the contaminants outside of the home. But really, for comfort, having a highly oxygenated environment on the inside is comfortable. But in order to make sure that this ventilation operates with maximum energy efficiency, keeps with the theme of low energy, very little electrical inputs for the ventilation system is similar to the heating and cooling system. So having a ventilation system that can, extract all of the heat energy out of the stale air that's leaving the home and transfer it to incoming cold air in the wintertime, for example, is a part of the system as well. So there you have your 5 parts.
So just to recap, number 1 is super insulated envelopes. Number 2 is airtight construction. Number 3 is high-performance glazing on the windows. Number 4 is thermal bridge-free detailing. And number 5 is heat recovery ventilation. All right, so the next most asked question is how much more expensive is it to build a passive house compared to a standard house?
We get asked this question lots from prospects, and it really depends what the house is being compared to. We get told all the time that our passive homes are cheaper. They cost less than most local custom home builders. But our approach is focused on affordability. We do advertise ourselves, market ourselves as the most affordable passive house option anywhere in North America. So we really have put in a lot of research and development into minimalistic approach to design, minimizing materials, minimizing labor, making the passive home as affordable as possible. Cost for building a passive home would be approximately 5% greater in cost. So the cost really is low incrementally. And when you factor in the savings in energy, it's actually a cheaper house to live in, and it has been for the past 5 years. So, it's the main reason why we started building our passive homes in 2016. But it's affordable, has been for a long time. And it's when you think about cost of building anything to code today and the cost of energy, your passive home with small incremental cost to build with the energy savings is actually a cheaper way to live when you look at cost of living most of the time.
Okay, so to recap, how much more does it cost?
5% more to build a passive home than a code built home.
All right, so number 5, what is the impacts of passive house? Now, I wanted to ask you this question because this is one of the most asked questions on Google. What is the impacts of a passive house? You also live in one. So I want you to tell me what the impact you've seen has been living in a passive house of your own.
I think one thing that everyone can relate to since really 2012, when we started to go through our energy crisis, when energy really started to increase and has been skyrocketing in recent years. The most affordable house to live in is now the one that saves the most amount of energy, as long as you can build it affordably, right? And that is the main driver for me, and it's got a lot of other benefits as well.
Is it fair to say that now that passive is here, and in your experience with passive, standard code-built homes, from a ownership perspective, a money perspective, an investment perspective, is it almost like a standard? Like, to me, it almost seems like building a code-built home and owning that, along with all of the heating and the cost of living costs that come with it after you buy it, on top of your mortgage, that's more of a liability than an asset, right?
Oh, huge. Yeah, huge. It's the worst thing anyone can do. Really, protect your investment. So homes, real estate in general always goes up, right? It's never going to go down. But when you look at the way the codes are moving, and this isn't just in Canada or the States, this is right around the world. Over 250 countries in the world now have mandated legislation in place to be net zero within 20 years.
That's in regards to housing, right?
It's in regards to housing, and but transportation is moving along the same lines too. So when you think of, like, the point is, when you think of protecting your investment, the way that the codes are moving, the only way you're going to protect your investment is to building to the future minimum code standard. Reality is, you build a house to code today. That house is going to be designed to run off of propane or gas. In order to run off a electric heat pump, which will be ultimately the only option with respect to the net zero code, that house is gonna need to be renovated. It's gonna need to be upgraded from a energy efficiency perspective. So major renovations are going to happen. There's going to be government incentives down the road, just like there is government renovations incentives right now to have these same energy upgrades starting now. But like any government incentive, it's not a free project. It's half, usually in the incentive is a portion of the retrofit, as much as 50% of the cost of the retrofit, let's say, government might incentivize, but 50% is cash out of pocket, thousands of dollars, so it do it once and for all, and build to the future code standard today. Really, it is a no-brainer. Of course, building a house requires you to go out and buy your own piece of property, but people, it's the only type of home that protects the investment. And if that is a concern to anyone building out there, then there's really is only one option: build your net zero house. And the best net zero home is obviously your passive house, because it really takes energy conservation to a whole other level.
Beautiful. Well, there you have it, folks. Some of the most asked questions about passive house. Thanks for joining us. This has been Mikhail Laxton and Paul Keeley, Passive House Show.